Hi everyone, this is Mohammed Fadden, and in this tutorial I'll be showing you how to do a simple REST API testing using the IBM Rational Test Workbench. Now, this is the high-level architecture of the use case. We have a demo API here. I'm using the REST API example.com demo. So basically what you see here is that once we make the request, either a GET request, a POST, the CRUD request in general, the request will go through the proxy recording component. Now the proxy recording component comes with the Rational Integration Tester, where basically all the requests and the responses will be recorded within the integration tester workbench. So we can test our APIs, either the public live APIs or even our internal environments APIs. As long as we have the proxy recording setup, as long as we are sending all our requests through the proxy recording component, we will always be able to record our API requests and responses as well. Just one small thing here, the Rational Test Workbench is a testing automation suite that allows you to implement the continuous testing practice within your organization. The Rational Test Workbench suite includes the functional testing, performance testing, integration testing, API testing, and the creation of stubs or mockups using the test virtualization component. Now, the Rational Integration Tester will be installed within your machine or within the test engineer machine, and as well as, of course, the browser. And once you make the request, as I mentioned before, all the requests and the responses will be recorded. I'd like to mention one more thing here, and basically you can do the integration testing for databases calls, as well as for many other type of protocols. Okay, so let's jump into the demo. Now, before I go to the demo, let me actually go to the demo API page just to show you. So this is a very simple and basic straightforward API that we would like to conduct a unit testing kind of style for this API. Okay, so let's just go to our environment. Once we go to the environment over here, we will be welcomed with this page, or with this kind of tab, and this is called the logical view tab. Now, in the logical view tab, usually you would be making your test API components, and so that the recording proxy knows exactly which endpoint you are recording. So let's just do this one now. I'll click the right click button, and then I'll just go to the web component over here, and then I'll click on the HTTP connection, because since this is a simple HTTP call, okay, to our API. So I'm gonna say, let's say API, for example, server, or okay. Now the component went there, so let me just drag it over here. Let me create a logical kind of grouping so that it becomes even clear for our test colleagues who will be using this projects to actually conduct their own testing, etc. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on new, and then I'm going to go to general, and then I'm going to click on the service component. So service component is just a logical kind of grouping for our resource endpoints. So I'll say external APIs. Okay, so created the API server component. What we're going to do is bind the component to this logical resource group. So we double click on this guy, and then we change the parent of the API server, okay, into the external APIs resource group. We click OK, and then we click again. And then now you can see that the API server component is actually within the external API logical group. Now let's just take a second here. Now the whole point of creating such logical components and separating your endpoints within logical group, etc., is because it is very critical and important, okay, to let your colleagues in your teams to understand what exactly the system under test looks like, okay, and what are the components that are interacting with other components, okay, because this will really ease your integration testing of APIs, your JDBC calls to databases, as well as to your application servers, etc. Okay, as well as it will make it very easy for your team to do a handover, okay, to the other team members, etc., for the testing activities. Now, since we created this, and now since we bound since we bound the API server within the external API logical group, what we can do is that basically we'll go into this guy, and then we need to create a physical, okay, endpoint. We basically need to attach, okay, or bind a URL to these components. So create a new web server, okay, set bindings, and then local, and then create a new web server, and then we will copy and paste the API endpoint that we are going to be calling. Okay, so I'll be removing all the slashes and the HTTP protocol, and then since this is just a normal simple HTTP call, so I'm going to just put the port 80, and then we can even test the transport that the URL actually works. And yes, it indeed. Okay, that's good. So I'm gonna be calling this. So what I'm going to do is I will call it REST, okay, API example.com, which is basically the same name of the service or of the website that we are actually using here today. Okay, so now we have the logical component, and we have the resource group, as well as the logical component is bound to the REST API example.com website. So what we can do now is basically we go to the Recording Studio tab, okay, and then we will click on the plus button here to add this logical component, okay, so that we can be able to start recording all the traffic, okay, that are sent to the logical component of our API endpoint, and also as well as the response back. Okay, so this is the external API. We click on this one, and then you will see our API servers over here. We click OK button. Okay, and then this is the color. Basically, you can just choose any color you want so that you can differentiate between multiple of endpoints that are being recorded, okay, for such requirements. And then we'll click on the start recording button over here. Now, once we click on the start recording button, what we can do is we can just go and open the Firefox web browser, okay? I will be copy and pasting the API, okay? And then what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to be calling, okay, the employee API so that I can fetch the employee profile. Now, I will paste the ID of the employee that I'm going to fetch the profile, okay, so I'll click the enter button. Now this is basically the employee, this is basically the salary of the employee, and it basically returns a JSON body, okay, response tag. Okay, so now since we made this call, we go to the Rational Integration Tester, and then you will see here that there was a call to the API server, which basically the dummy REST API.com example, and then this is basically the request, and this is the response, and you can see that the response was recorded as well with the employee name, the salary, the age, the profile image. Of course, there is no profile image because I did not really create any profile image for this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to highlight on those two, okay, the request and the response. I'll click the right button, and then from this menu you can choose if you want to create a test or I create a parameterized test, so that you can actually feed your test script from a database or a data set. And what I'm going to do, I'm just gonna go and choose the create test option for the sake of this demo. And then you can even choose the type of the test that you want to have. Is it unit test, integration test, or mockup of your APIs? And then what we're going to do is basically choose the unit test again, and then click on next button. And then it says here, do you want to have it as a hard-coded values or in a simple data set? So I'll just choose the hard-coded values over here. And then this is basically the request again, and this is the response. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to change this operation name into something else. I'm going to call it get employee profile. Okay, so I'll call it get employee profile. I will rename this. I'll click on this, and now here it says, do you want to create the test under the resource group of external APIs? I will say yes, please do that. Okay, and here it is very important to notice that all the dynamic headers, like the transfer encoding, the content length, etc., Rational Integration Tester is recommending you to remove them, because they are usually generated whenever you actually make the API request, and then when you get the API response as well. So it is better to remove this so that we don't call the API with the exact same header fields or parameters every time. So automatically RIT is going to be allowing us to remove this. If you don't want to remove a field, just basically untick on this button, but I'll just keep it as is for now, like this. Click on the next, and then I will name this unit test the get employee profile unit test. Click on the finish button. Now we went to the test factory page. Now in the test factory page, we can see that this is basically our test script, or our test, and for the get employee profile API. And you can see that this is going to be the send request, and this is going to be the receive reply that we got from the API when we called them. Good. So what we can do is, if you want to customize something, you can just double click on this, and then you will be able to actually add some kind of extra parameters. You can even modify the HTTP headers and even the HTTP method type from get to post, etc. It really, you can customize nearly everything in your recorded API request, API response. And also for the receive reply, it's the exact same thing. You can see everything is here. You can even go and parameterize these values. Anyway, so I'll click on the cancel button again. And then there are so many other things here. You can even put, for example, comments. You can do some SQL queries, SQL commands. You can run SQL commands as well. You can do some kind of a GUI interactions, where basically you can actually iterate over a test or over a test data as well. You can have some kind of loops, and so on. Anyway, so we will go now to the testing lab over here, and I want to run this test. So basically what I'm going to do, I will do right click, and then I will do run. When I do run, basically the Rational Integration Tester is gonna be calling, the get employee profile API in tested. So now you can see that the test status actually is passed, and the reason why is, if we click on this command line or on this console, If you click on this console, you will see that um, the expected message really matches the actual message. So we were expecting the exact same ID, the exact same employee name, the salary, which is MMFAD and 11,000, etc. And the actual message that we got was really indeed the same. If I actually go, let's say that I go back again to the test factory, and then I change the message to, um, let's just say MMM, okay, and then I click OK button, and then I go to the test lab again, and then I run the test. Just click the save button. You will notice here that the test failed, and the reason why it failed is because, click on this one, because the employee name was triple M, but the actual message was different. So this is why basically the test of the API failed. Okay, so what we can do, so using the rational integration tester, okay, you can actually do API testing. In these API testing really varies from RESTful APIs, WESDL APIs, XML, etc. And you can also even provide the JSON body or the schema, like the WSDL or the WADL schema, to rational integration tester, and then it will create the test scripts, I would say, based on the schema without really calling the actual APIs. So I hope this is very helpful for you guys. In the future, I'll be creating another video which basically talks about how you can actually run this API testing in a Docker container on the cloud when you have your DevOps pipeline, for example, and then you want to do the testing within the continuous integration phase. This API that we created can be able to run on a Docker container, and then it will be vanished, or the container will be killed right away after we complete the testing. Thank you so much guys for watching. I hope this is helpful for people who are actually using Rational Integration Tester or plan to use Rational Integration Tester. Thank you again.